everyone. Today's date is September 24, 2013, and the time is 1:30 p.m. Council will please come to order for its work session. And once again, welcome and thank you all for taking time from your schedules to be in attendance at today's work session. Before we begin, may I remind everyone to either turn your cell phones off or set them to vibrate, and we appreciate your cooperation in that regard. For the audio record being made, I'd like to note that the following council members are present at today's work session: Ms. Bolton, Mr. Bonato, Mr. Mattei, Ms. Miles, Mr. Shu, Ms. Velasquez, and Chairperson Vaca Gonzalez. The first item on the agenda is petitions or communications, and I don't know if anyone has signed up to address council. No one has signed up, so we'll move to the next agenda item, number 2, and that is consideration of the 2014 property, casualty, and workers' compensation coverage through CIRSA. And Mr. Aker, I believe you'll present this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. When we last discussed this, there was one piece of information that the council requested, and that was the number of claims we've had. Through August, we've had 13 claims for a total loss of $25,833 with property and casualty. Let's see. And for workers' compensation, we've got 8 claims for $35,909. Also had a request from Councilmember Bolton on what our premiums would be for the different potential workman's comp deductibles. If you recall, right now we're currently at 0 deductible. The alternatives would be $500 deductible, $1,000 deductible, and $2,500 deductible, with the contributions as we do our deductibles going down to $364,901 for a $500 deductible, $353,350 for a $1,000 deductible, and $341,798 for a $2,500 deductible, with the 0 deductible being at $377,896, and that's before any credits we get for our audits and things of that nature. My thought is that we could potentially have some cost savings by doing the deductibles, but if we go over our contribution amount and pay more in deductibles, we might, or have more claims, we might actually erase any of those savings. So it's one of those balancing acts. My thought, as I said at the last meeting, was to potentially consider keeping it the same, see if we can't see a little bit more of a trend. If we were to go to deductible, I think I would only drop to the $500 deductible. But it's also council's input to staff would be helpful as well. And then for property and casualty, the information from CIRSA is suggesting we leave it at the same. If we increase our deductibles, we're not actually gaining any money given our loss history. And they take a 3-year kind of rolling look at our history and claims as they give us recommendations.
It appears to me that if we went with a $1,000 deductible on the work comp based on this year's claims to date, we would have saved $16,546.
Okay.
Even if we had paid $1,000 deductible on each of those claims.
Right. And what they're showing, some of the analysis that they've done is our contribution will decrease, our deductible billings will increase, of course, and we could have some savings. So it could. So we can go either way, and just if we do that, we'll work our hardest, even if we were going to leave it the same, to prevent having workman's comp claims. Mm-hmm. So any little bit of money that we can save is fine. And if that's council's desire, we can have them provide us a quote sheet that shows that and have it ready for the next regular meeting.
If I understood what you said earlier, there were 13 claims through August?
Yes. That's for property casualty, 8 claims for workman's comp.
Okay. Seems like a lot. I mean, I don't know what a lot is, but at 13, that's one every 2.5 weeks. Workman's comp, the personal injury tax, are we not doing what we're supposed to do, or are
Well,
we?
again, the property casualty is what's 13, 8 weeks. It's
Okay.
about once a month. We are working to get better at having any workman's comp claims.
And how, you probably don't know, but how does this compare with what we did last year? And are we getting better or getting worse? And then it begs the question, why?
My sense is we're getting better because we've got our safety team taking a look at things. We're also updating our safety manual. I'm wanting to put it at everyone's forefront as far as part of the reviews each year as well. And as I've had risk managers tell me, all accidents are preventable. We need to educate folks and get them trained properly on how to handle things. Accidents can't happen, but you can prevent a lot. So that's what we've got to work on. I would say this year was the first year we had both fire stations and the water department pass the CIRSA audit with no dings. And if we can continue to work, those are, with all the departments, and those are little things like extension cords and fire extinguishers and things of that nature.
Right.
That goes to help get that sense of safety in the culture.
Well, you'd almost kind of expect that a fire department are gonna do things right. Safety's kind of like their business. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to be wise or be cute. You kind of would expect that. And I asked myself, what can we do to control this? Well, obviously, we can't go to a different carrier. Well, maybe we could, but a different carrier is not very practical. We don't have any control over the premiums. They are what they are, except that the incidents in which we use them, we have the greatest control over. And,
Yes.
And how can we impact that so that it's like car insurance, you know, you don't get yourself in positions where you have claims.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
May I?
Yes,
With those 8 on the workman's comp, have any of them returned?
I would say, to my knowledge, I think what we try to do is get them all to return because we've instituted light duty. So they're coming back. I know there was one gentleman that is still out that I'm aware of, but the other ones we've asked them to come back to light duty, and most of the claims get resolved and they're back to full work.
And you have light duty?
Yes, ma'am. There's only one instance that I'm aware of right now. We're trying to struggle to see where what that individual's doctor is going to say and what our workman's comp doctor is going to say and what he can do for light duty. But light duty can include filing papers in the city clerk's office.
Yeah.
You should have seen the look on his Gary's face.
Or the city attorney.
Right, there you go. Oh, the fun we'll have.
From my experience as an employee with workman's comp issues and the like, there usually, or customarily was an investigation to follow and make sure that.
Yes.
That
That's what the
we're
safety-
doing all of that.
We're
kind of
doing all
stuff.
that. That's what the safety team does. They
Okay.
review all those and make recommendations on how we can improve.
Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion on that particular agenda item?
With that, what I will do is we'll have an updated packet with showing $1,000 deductible. And then council will get to see as we're in the process of updating not only the safety manual, but the policy manual, and we'll be bringing that to council as well before we get anything.
The next agenda item, sorry, is agenda item number 3, and that's discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Aker, did you want to move the discussion about the vehicle purchases until after agenda item number 4?
Yeah, so I kind of rethought that over the weekend, and I think I'd like to go ahead and do the budget discussion first, because I think it kind of sets the stage. Even though I still feel that it could be a good choice, I think in all fairness, the city council wanted to give you guys, this is first time we've had an in-depth discussion for quite a while. I think when I first started, we talked about the budget and financial statements, but we're going into the budget time. We'll be getting a draft budget next week, and I think it might be best if we shift that one to after the budget discussion.
Right, so if there are no objections, we'll jump forward to agenda item 4, which is the financial update and preliminary budget discussion. And Mr. Aker, I believe you and Mr. Medina are going to be responsible for this.
Yes, ma'am, we're gonna tag team this one, and bear with us as we're both presenting this in front of this particular council for the first time, and maybe doing things, and probably likely are doing things a little bit differently that's been done in the past. What we wanted to start out with, and at your place, you have some of our very, very preliminary working numbers. These are the numbers that we've been working on through the month of August to get input into the budget and reflect the initial request from our departments for funding for next year. What we wanted to do is kind of give you go through the financial, give you where we kind of stand for 2013. And Lonnie's got some additional sheets that I think are new that he's been including that I think helps tell the story a little bit better. Then we just want to go hit a high level, just cursory, just look at the numbers that we're looking at for next year to give council kind of an idea of kind of some of the challenges that we're facing with our budget. And then what we've got left to do, and we've actually started at this meeting with the departments to whittle down the budget to where our expenditures are more closely matching our expenditures. So we wanted to do just a high-level discussion, we didn't provide a lot of the detailed line items because we're not ready for that. We'll give you a detailed preliminary budget as customary on October 1st, so that you've got plenty of chance to take a look at it. Then have department heads come and present on October 8th, and then continue to have those discussions until we adopt the budget later in December. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director to cover the financial information, and then I will help kind of wrap it up, and then if you guys have got, I'll be asking for some suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie.
How are you?
Real good.
First, I'm going to go off of our July 31st financial statements, and just to give you a picture where we are today. And if you look at the balance sheet, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this here, but it's going to go in and show what our assets are, cash, receivables, equipment, similar items like that. And we're showing that the city has almost $44 million in assets as of July 31st, 2013. If you go to the next page, which is 4-2, our liabilities are coming out to, and it's saying fund by fund, so we have to keep track of each asset and liability by fund. So if you look at the 01 is our general fund, 2 is power, 3 is water, and so forth. So we have to keep track of each one, and we have to balance each one at the end of every month. So the end of July, we had about 5.6 million. I guess I better put my glasses on. $5.617 million in liabilities. And then the fund equity is coming out to the $38.331 million on that. And then total liabilities and fund equity, fund balance is $43,948. So I don't know if you had ever seen anything like that to see what kind of assets we have and liabilities we have here at the city. If you go to page 3 of this one again is showing by fund. So if you look at the general fund, it's showing that as of July 31st, again, we have $4.522 million in revenue that came in, and expenditures of $4.731. So we're at a loss at the end of July of $209,000. Now, excuse me, I expect that to grow before the end of the year, and mainly because our sales taxes are down, and also our property tax, we will no longer be receiving the same amount of money. We're pretty much received everything that we've received at the end of July, possibly a little bit more in August, September, October, and November. I don't imagine we'll be receiving any money or very little money at that time. And we're talking on averaging probably about $200,000 to $250,000 per month that we're going to be losing from now on. So, and we'll show that on the budget. What we're projecting to show us a loss for the end of the year. If you look at the Power and Light Fund, that one as well is going to have some loss on it, but we are transferring money out of the Power and Light into the general fund. So these are our enterprise funds: power, water, gas, sewer, and the sewer is actually showing a loss of $510,000. And that's mainly because they have a big note payment they have to make on a quarterly basis, which is over $250,000 a quarter. Okay. The lottery fund, that pretty well takes care of itself. We try and keep our fund balance positive on that as well. And the capital fund, again, we haven't spent a whole lot of money out of our capital fund this year. And library fund is a little bit ahead right now. So if we were looking at this for the whole city of Trinidad, we're looking that we would have made about $19,000 or $19,000, almost $20,000 of income. But again, we have to keep track of each one by fund, and just because the whole city has $20,000, we can't mingle the monies together. Okay, mingle the funds together. Again, the fund ending fund balance is the $38 million that we showed on the previous page.
Well, I'd also like to make the observation, we didn't really make $20,000. We just didn't spend $578 in the capital fund.
Right,
And that's not a helpful picture.
right. Okay, if we look at 4-4, this is going to start in on our budget now for this year. For 2013, what we're projecting for the rest of this year, and then what we're projecting for 2014. So on 4-4, again, these are really preliminary estimates. Hopefully by this time next week, we're going to have it tied down a bit better. But if you look at the budget for 2013, the revenues are coming out to $8.7 million. Projecting now, we're looking at $7.8 million of being the revenue. And we're kind of being flat for 2014, having almost the same amount there. Again, with the revenue, our property taxes are actually, again, the assessed value is going down. We're going to be losing some money on that. And also our sales tax is down about 7 to 8% for the whole year. So we don't think that that's going to change at all for the rest of this year. Hopefully next year it'll get a little bit better. On the expenditure side of it, again, we're looking at $9.7 million for budget, what was budgeted for 2013. And it looks like we're going to be about $8.8 million for this year, and about 9.7, 9.8 for next year. Deficits, again, we're looking at having almost close to $1 million in deficit for this year's general fund for operating expenses. For 2014, we're looking almost at $2 million, so we've got some work to do during the next week to decide how we're going to cut down on our expenses for 2014. The good thing is we still have fund balance in there. Our fund balance we're projecting for the end of this year is $3.6 million and 1.6 for 2014. Our fund balance reserves and designations, even though we do have fund balance, say, for projected of 2013 of $3.6 million, we have some of it reserved or designated. So if we look down there, there's $1.5 million in cash flow reserve, and the cash flow reserve is basically what we're saying we need 2 months worth of cash or worth of money to pay for 2 months worth of expenses. So that would be the $1.5 million in there. And if things are going the way we're looking at, for future appropriation, we only have $575,000 for 2013, it would be a negative amount for 2014. So again, we do have work to do to try and cut this down a bit. Any questions?
If I could add and refresh council's memory, we did in last year's budget, when we adopted the budget, we anticipated about $1 million shortfall. That budget was also based on a 3.5% increase in sales and use tax, as Mr. Woody said, and we've seen we're having anywhere from a 7 to 8% decrease. So I think we've got, as he laid out, we've got work to do, and we've actually already started working to reduce what our expenses are going to be for next year and for the remainder of this year.
4-5 is basically the same thing that we saw in 4-4 for expenses. It's just a little bit more information on the departments. And again, we have, I believe, 19 departments here in the general fund that we have to take care of. Again, we're looking at $8.8 million projected for expenses in 2013 and $9.8 million in 2014. We go to page 4.4-6. This is the Power and Light Fund. This is our enterprise zone fund, or excuse me, enterprise fund. And on this one, we had budgeted for 2013 $8,064,000 in operating revenues. We're looking almost at $300,000 less, excuse me, in income for 2013. What we're projecting in 2014, we're being optimistic and hoping to have about $7.873 million there. In operating expenses, again, $7.858 million in 2013 is what we budgeted. It looks like we're going to be really close to that, 7.84. And for 2014, we're going to be up around $8 million. So operating income, again, for 2013 projected, it's a little bit less than $80,000 loss, and about $131,000 loss in 2014. We go down and look at our changes in net position because we transferred money out of the Power and Light Fund into the operating or the general fund. We're looking at having a change in that position for 2013 of about $429,000 loss, and in 2014 about $481,000 loss.
Are the losses problem with what we were supposed to do at the first of the year by raising the utility rate for the electric? Is that playing a factor in it?
Right.
Because we were planning on doing it, but we never did do it, that 4.5%.
Raises would have been, or if we would have raised the rates on it, it would have probably taken care of the losses that we had.
Are those, anything planned to readjust those?
Well, we're going to do take another look at our rates, and I'm still going to be working with Mr. Euler to try to offset. I think we had about a $20,000 delta between what we thought we'd collect and what we had collected, and work with him and trying to get that adjusted as well. But we're also going to take a look at how we can reduce our expenses as well before we start looking at raising rates, at least in the power fund.
If there would have been a 5% increase, it probably would have been close to $400,000 more in revenue that would have came in.
Yeah, we were supposed to do that, but we never did, because that was an adjustment to get this power light so we wouldn't have that shortage.
Any questions on this? Still on page 4-6, we do have fund balances still of we're expecting to have $3.324 million and for 2013 and $2.84 million for 2014. So, you know, we still have fund balance in there to stay afloat for, even if we're losing $400,000 per year for several years to come. If we look at the water fund, this one again with the revenues projected for, or excuse me, the budget for 2014, 2013 is 2.124 million, and on 2013, we're actually projecting to have 2.079 million. And just a little bit more in 2014. Our operating expenses, again, we projected to have, or we budgeted 2.251 million. There's 2.146 million that's projected for 2013. In 2014, we're at 2.28 million. So again, we're looking at operating losses of approximately 67,000 for 2013 and about 186,000 for 2014. With our interest revenue and our transfers out, our total change in net position, again, for 2013, we're actually going to be coming out a little bit ahead on this. At 152,000, and for 2014, we're looking at $493,000 loss. So again, we're still working on this, and we do think it's gonna change a bit before next Thursday, or next Tuesday, excuse me. The gas fund on 4-8, we look at this one, we budgeted operating revenues at 4.734 million, and we're projecting to have 4.861 million, so it looks like this one we're actually going to be making a little bit more revenue than we had anticipated at the budget time last year. And in 2014, it looks like it's even going to be a little bit more money there. Operating expenses, again, 4.265 million for 2013 was budgeted. 4.223 million is what we're projecting. And the 2014 budget is 4.526 million. So we are expecting operating revenues in the gas fund for 2013 and 2014. And even with the transfers out for 2013, we're still looking to be positive about $99,000. And 2014, it looks like we're going to be down about $99,000. Again, the fund balance on this fund, we're still at 3.65 is what we're projecting for 2013, and 2014 is 3.665. So again, we should be fine with the gas for next year. Sewer fund, this is one where we're having a little bit of trouble in. It's possible that rates are going to have to be increased on this one at some time or another, hopefully sooner than later. For the net changes in net position, or basically the net income or net loss for this one, we had budgeted about $95,000 loss for 2013. But right now we're projecting about $187,000 loss for 2013 and almost $267,000 loss for 2014.
How much do we owe on the plant, sewer plant? I mean, when will our payments end on that, extended out?
You know, I would have to look into that. I don't know when that's.
That seems to be the biggest issue with what we got there.
Right.
I know Jim looked at trying to refinance it, but it wouldn't pay off at that particular time. But maybe that's something
We could definitely take a look at that. I'm gonna say we've got 7, 8 years. For some reason that's sticking in my head, but we can get that information. I don't have it off the top of my head either. I do recall being told that we've made a concerted effort not to raise rates at the time because bonds were let.
Now, if that's paid off, would that amount of money with the way the sewer rates, would we be making money in there? Or is that the biggest problem, is the payment out?
We're making a payment of $250,000 out per quarter. So it's $1 million a year is what we're paying out, but the interest on it was $116,548 for the first two quarters on it. So we're paying out $1 million, but we're only showing an expense of $116,000. Okay. What happens with it is we have an asset now that we purchased, and now we're just taking the liability away from it. So in this type of fund, the amount that you pay in principal is not an expense. It's just a payment that we have to make on it. Would the increase help us out? Yes. increase in sewer rates would get us into the positive amount again.
Because we're taking money out of water
Right.
and anywhere else,
We're taking water and the gas.
and gas.
We're taking, looks like 223,000 out of the water department, and we're taking out 173,000 out of the gas department.
So that's enough to make, I mean, that amount of money is enough to make up the difference in what the sewer is actually making, to take care of the payment?
It's helping with the payment. We're still looking at having a $187,000 loss for this year, even with their help. And we're looking at having next year about $267,000 in losses with the help of the water and the gas department.
Is there any issue, is there any way we can change some of that around, other than maybe raise rates? Is there, I mean, that's kind of silly to ask, but there's got to be some way that maybe through grant, have we ever looked into maybe getting some grant money or something to help pay with it?
Well, usually what happens with the grant money is you actually have to do something to
Well, I
get the
understand
money
that,
first,
but
so.
we're also shelling out 300-some thousand from water and gas too.
Mm-hmm.
So if that would make up the difference.
I'm not aware of any grants that would help us pay for operating expenses in
Well, what,
our funds.
yeah, and I don't think anything would pay for operating, but I'm talking about, paying for the plant itself, because we do own that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that would be available.
We can explore, but we also, with all our, like sewer and water especially, I think gas, all our enterprise funds, we have to start taking a look at a long-term look as far as additional improvements that are going to be needed 5, 10, 20 years down the road as well. At some point, I'd like to bring back, the gentleman from Black and Beach was going to do another discussion on some of the infrastructure and what towns and cities are looking at. I'd like to bring him back as well to city council on a long-term look on aging infrastructure and what we need to start looking at.
Yeah, 'cause we still need to do the power plant,
Right.
substation.
Yeah.
And the water meters, I think the backflow preventers that
We're going to
the
bring that.
state has
Yep.
reminded us about a number of times.
We need to put in an ordinance on the backflow preventers and take care of things of that nature as well, so.
Any other questions on the sewer? Okay, we'll move on to 4-10 under lottery fund. And we're expecting to have about $80,000 in revenue for 2013 and 2014. We're being flat with that as well. We're hoping the same amount or more comes in. Expenditures, we're looking at $117,000 in expenditures for 2013 and 2014 of $152,000. So we're expecting to lose about $37,000 for 2013 and $72,000 for 2014. Again, we do have a fund balance that we're looking at carrying over of 110, almost 111 in 2013 and 39,000 in 2014. Any questions? 4-11, that's going to be the tourism fund. We did budget $210,000 for 2013, but it looks more realistic. It's going to be around $170,000. And we're going to be a little bit optimistic in 2014, saying around $190,000. Expenses are coming out to, for 2013, we're projecting $213,000 and $206,000 for 2014. Again, we're showing losses for 2013 of $43,000 and almost $16,000 for 2014. We do have fund balance for 2013. We're probably going to have to make a few changes in 2014 to balance that one out. 4-12 is the capital projects fund, and with 1% sales tax, we get 4% total for the general fund, and for the capital projects fund, 1% actually comes to the capital projects fund. We're looking at having about $1.14 million. Again, we're lower than last year, and we're also lower than what we budgeted. Again, our sales tax is down again. 2014, we look like we're gonna have about $1.2 million in sales tax, again, being a bit optimistic. Capital project funds, it looks like we may spend around $716,000 this year, and it will go up next year to, we're looking at $3.5 million. Our net position at the end, we're still carrying a balance. Looks like even our change in net position this year is going to be $417,000 in net income, and which means our net position is going to increase to about $2.5 million. Next year, though, we will be spending, it looks like $2.3 million more than what we are bringing in, and we will have only $154,000 or so in that position as of, or fund balance as of the end of the year 2014.
Can you remind me the grant that was budgeted for $1.1 million or $1.084 million, and we've only gotten 12,000?
Let me look a little bit, see if I've got a little bit more detail on that one. There were several projects that were going on that we were planning on doing, we just haven't started any of them.
I'm talking about the grant, the revenue side?
Yeah, that would be part of it as well. The capital projects, you're saying? It would be, I think there were some road.
I think it's associated with the Main Street project, the design on that. A lot of these grants we get are based on our reimbursements, so we spend money, we get money back from those agencies. If you recall, the Main Street project's been delayed with CDOT. We're trying to get some of the additional right-of-way cleared. Yeah. The Welcome Center, we're waiting on contracts for that one. Again, that's another one that we had budgeted and we'll get funds in as we spend funds. So most of the grants we get are not money that we get up front and get to spend it. It's we spend some money, they give us some money when we get reimbursed.
And now looking at this too, the grants for 2014 will probably increase by whatever we think that we're gonna do next year. So it would probably increase probably close to another $1 million again for 2014.
And if you'll recall, we've so
Because
far.
it should to match the capital
Right.
expenditure. You
Yeah.
got 3.5 million in expenditures, but nothing in grants.
Right. And that's my mistake.
Okay.
If you recall, we've only we've submitted a grant for Central Park for some improvements there, which would have earmarked essentially some money from the 2014 capital project. And then also the second phase of Commercial Street through DOLA. Those are the only two projects we've gotten for grants as of yet. Mr. Feinberg, as I put in my update, we're looking at potentially looking at a DOLA grant for Kit Carson, the gazebo, because the cost came in higher than what we had budgeted. And we think the Historical Society would be good for that. Is also looking for a facade improvement grant downtown. So a couple more grants we may be looking at coming into next year. And then I'm kind of jumping ahead, but since we're on capital projects, we're also looking at the street paving program again next year, continuing with that program that we've started. Looking at some roto milling, because I think we've come up with a plan on how to take care of that in-house, so we won't have to budget for that in the bid documents. And then as it's come up recently, all the brick streets in town, I've got staff putting together a long-term plan on that for capital improvements over the next 5 or 10 years.
So at the current time, do we have a formal capital improvements plan?
We're in the process of, let me rephrase my answer on that. I think we've got what we put in the budget for this year. What we're going to present to you in the budget for 2014 is more of a real 5-year plan to look at, and that's what we're putting together, and we'll finalize and have it for draft for you on next Tuesday.
Any other questions?
I'm gonna, Ronnie has done his thing. I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit what our next steps are from what Ronnie and I have been working on. We've been, and we'll meet with the rest of the departments tomorrow and Thursday. We're working with them to take a look at where our expenses are to date this year and where we think we'll be at the end of the year, asking the questions of, are you really gonna need to spend that money? And I'll use example of, I worked with Street and Bridge to look at where we think overtime will be. And can we reduce some of those expenses? So we're really working hard to try to whittle down those expenses, yep, this year, but also taking a look at what we can carry over into next year as far as actual expenses. One of our biggest one is, of course, public safety. We've got to work with the police department and take a look at what we can do to work with the department to provide our services, yet try to reduce the costs that we're spending as well.
One last thing that I didn't mention about the whole budget was we are anticipating a 41% increase in our health insurance. And that's gonna be about anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 more that we're gonna have to pay in 2014. So,
And how much did they go up this year?
Yeah, they went up in the 20s.
31%.
Right.
And now an additional 41%?
right.
Yes.
Unfortunately, go ahead.
We had a meeting with our insurance broker this morning. Our overall average over the past 9 years has been a 12% increase. We think that Rocky Mountain Health is trying to, and at the direction of the Department of Insurance, has said you've got to bring our rates back, more in normal with other entities. We're faced with the unfortunate circumstance of we're paying out more claims than we're collecting money for the insurance companies. We did have a second entity quote us this year. It was Aetna. It's not quite as rich of a plan as the plan that we've currently got. And Dave and Denise are continuing to try to work with Rocky on some potential ways to maybe take a look at our insurance claims and see if there's anything else that we can do to reduce our increases. But our average is actually about a percentage point below what the national average is on insurance rates if you look at the long term. If you'll recall, we had 1 year where we had a negative 1%. It's actually a decrease in the insurance rate, and had several years of 1% increases. So I think what they're doing is making up for that lost revenue.
I believe the people at the Housing Authority had shared with me that they had some conversations with
Yes.
a broker from Pueblo.
Yes.
How did those work out
We
for
are
our group?
And Ms. Garrett can probably answer this more, may have updated news than I've got, but the last we talked, we were still waiting on them to quote us. However, our broker did go to that same insurance company and they declined to quote us because they didn't feel they could be competitive.
They did take their insurance quote to several different companies, and there were several of them that declined to give us a quote because they felt our price, that their price would be too high for what we're already getting. So, but they did look at 6, 7 different places.
And in our preliminary budget, we had initially been told it could be up to 41%. They did their best, I believe, to try to get that down, and still are, but that's what we carried in our budget. And we haven't made any adjustments as far as what the employee contributions are versus city contributions. Those are things that we'll be taking a look at in the coming weeks as we try to wrestle with how do we reduce our budget overall, but also work with the employees.
No. And acid. My ulcer's acting
Did you ask for acid? That's what I feel like I'm saying.
I've had many a sleepless night as we've been, coming up with what we have as a large gap to deal with. And again, some of these union representatives were in our insurance meeting and they asked me, and I said, I'm still, and Lonnie and I are still trying to work our best to try to figure out how can we reduce reduce expenses and minimize impacts to employees and minimize impacts to the public as well. So some of the things that we're looking at, just, and as we will bring them in for discussion, we'll have them as options, but landfill tipping fees. We haven't looked at those since 2002. I think that's something that we could take a look at. And of course, we've got the scale is certified now, and then we bring it back an ordinance to update to allow to take weight instead of volume. And I'd like to, have the consideration, we'll have some scenarios for increasing landfill tipping fees. We've already had the discussion as part of the building permit process about increasing some of our building permit and our contractor fees to bring them in line with what other communities are. I'm working with Mr. Feinberg, and I believe there's been some previous work done on should we take a look at where our planning and zoning fees should be. Again, I think we're well under some other communities. We need to continue to work with our public and decreasing our write-offs associated with any of our utility billings. As Mr. Medina mentioned, should we look at increasing sewer rates? Should we look at increasing the minimum water rate? I mean, $15 for 1,000 is really cheap. But those are just some ideas that we've got. Again, we need to reduce our expenses before we look at raising them.
I might also suggest you take a look at increasing the business permit fee.
That's another one, yep.
Can you quantify what kind of money we're looking at when we say we've got a 41% increase in the health insurance?
It's roughly, for the city, for the overall increase, it's roughly about a $400,000 increase.
Closer to 500.
Yeah.
Closer to $500,000?
The county recently, I spoke with Mr. Gill, and he recently mentioned that the county likewise is experiencing dramatic increases. I can't understand how, because I don't know insurance that well, but would there be any benefit for the city and county trying to do something together? Of mutual benefit to both of us.
We could certainly explore that. I've had some discussions with the hospitals, or a way we can, all get together and try to become a greater pool.
Sure.
We did look at the county pool. The county pool did decline to accept us because of some of our loss history from the insurance standpoint.
Understood.
So I think in times like this is when you have to get really creative.
I was under the impression that the 31% increase was to right the ship, and then I was expecting something in the single digits or close to that going forward.
I don't know if I was expecting single digits, but we were
Well,
all.
inflation is nothing.
Pardon?
Inflation is nothing.
Right.
9% is 8% real.
And we could have the broker come in and provide, in the work session, some more explanation. But a lot of it is our loss history. We're paying, $1 million in claims and
million in premiums and $2 million
$2 million
in claims they're
claims.
paying.
Wow.
So they're losing money on our group.
And I'm not an expert on insurance, but the Obamacare concept, I'm sure they've looked at that. Is there any benefit in connection with that legislation? I think it's supposed to become active October 1.
A general statement is, unfortunately, I don't see any benefits to Obamacare. I think we're hoping that they continue, some portions have been delayed. I think there's a push in the industry to try to delay some of the group plans as well. It may be that I guess we've got a pretty rich plan that we offer our employees and their families. But some families may look at, do they want to go off into the network and take advantage of that? But it all depends on, will they get any credits as far as where they are versus the poverty level and things of that nature. I mean, believe it or not, poverty level for a family of four is $97,000. So it's trying to, we gave them some information that they can take a look at as far as seeing if it might work. But again, if we have to offer a plan that's affordable, and we've got, I think, 30 slots, so to speak, that people could jump ship and go to the exchange, and we wouldn't be penalized. But if the other employees, or more than 30 employees, were to change and go to exchange, then we get a penalty of $3,000 a year. So even though we've been trying to have those discussions about, well, if we just said, we'll give you a stipend and you go get your insurance, can we do that? We can't do that without being penalized by the federal government under Obamacare. So even though some of these companies, you see Walgreens and some of these folks I've been reading recently are not offering health insurance, well, they're also, the Torrington John broker, are paying some penalties for that as well.
I think we need to look at the increase, plus also get a handle on what the penalties would be.
I think it's definitely something to look at.
Yes.
And the other thing, you know, it all comes down to personnel units. If you have a budget that you have to bring into line, you're gonna have to take a very hard look at FTEs. Are we using them effectively? Do we have some redundancies? Are there things that we can outsource? And I'm sorry, I love you a whole bunch, Mr. Downs, but is there a possibility that we could get legal services through a municipal entity as opposed to having an individual on staff? I mean, we're gonna have to look at hard personnel issues.
And we're, you know, when staff ask me, you know, they've asked this year about furloughs and layoffs, what I've been saying is they're not off the table. We've started taking a look at the hard looks at that as already, as far as the potential, because I think it's gonna take a little bit of everything to offset where we are.
And I know at one point in time there was some speculation or talk about perhaps our planning department and the county's planning department merging, and that's another place where FTEs could be dramatically affected. So I think we need to look at efficiencies and collaboration with the county where we may have some overlap in services.
Yes.
Do we have a hiring freeze in place right now?
Yes.
I think as we move forward with the budget, we are going to have to take a very hard look at the FTEs that we have to see if there's any way we can collapse, consolidate, because I'm here to tell you, the way that you save money in a budget, you've got to look at the personnel units. Everything else is small change. Your significant savings are going to come from the personnel units. And we've got to find efficiencies there.
We're in agreement.
With regard to a hiring freeze, didn't I just see a notice in the paper for city employees?
We've got a part-time in the Parks and Rec, but that's going from a part-time to a full-time. It's one of those positions that we had to fill. So what I've done is if we've got a position that we can live without, I'll use a Parks Boulevards staff person. We didn't hire that person. Our recreation had with such a small department as it is, we needed to have it's a janitorial type, but also helps with some of the programs, and we're going to a part-time person instead of a full-time person. I think that's the one that you probably saw as well.
What does a furlough, if you furlough a day for the whole city, what does that save us?
In rough numbers, $25,000 or $30,000 a pay period, and that's rough dollars because we have some police officers
Right.
fired that end up being in comp time situations and things of that nature. Then it also, my understanding, the last time we had furloughs, employees were able to buy a vacation day or use a vacation day.
They did.
I think we'd have to look at that differently this time. We've also had discussions of, just in general philosophy on furlough, do we do a full day or do we do 2 half days and accomplish the same thing but split it out over 2 paychecks for an employee? So we're looking at different scenarios on that matter as well.
Has any consideration been given to early retirement incentives? I believe some of our employees have considerable years of seniority.
I've asked staff to take a look at that as well, just to see if we were to do that, what it would be impact-wise to the budget. Remembering that some of our longtime employees that could be eligible for retirement, if they should be offered,
A lot of
also
accrued
have
days.
accrued a lot of accrued days of vacation and sick leave, which is also an expense to the city.
And I bet that's not, I bet that's an undeclared, it's kind of like a nebulous liability hanging out there.
I consider it an unfunded liability.
Yes,
and
that's what I was looking for.
we've had discussions in how do we start limiting that unfunded liabilities. Well, I think in the past, there's been, by looking at the union contracts and taking a look, there's been attempts to do that in the past. I think there's ways that we can further limit that as well, because a lot of employees are used that as they buy it out periodically, and that's been fine. As we've been okay with budget, as the budgets start tightening, we may want to take a look at that policy.
When you had mentioned 2 half days as compared to a full day, are you talking actual time away from work?
Yes.
Because the way the county is doing it, the employee gets 1 day, 1 8-hour block of time, but they are, have adjustments made to the paycheck. You get half of it in each pay period in terms of a full.
Is that what okay.
So you get.
We could do the same thing.
Penalized is a word that comes to mind, but you get reduced 4 hours in the first pay period, 4 hours in the second pay period, but you're gone a single day.
Yeah, I think being gone a full 8-hour period is more
It's easier.
economical, easier to manage, but I do appreciate that if you have that hit, if you can spread it over a couple of
That's what they
paychecks,
said,
that's
right.
better.
Makes it easy.
And then we also have to have the discussion, if we go that direction, is do we make it mandatory that it's all in one day, and you close City Hall and some of the services that can close, so that you take advantage of trying to save some utility costs, things of that nature, or do you try to spread it out? I mean, those are all things that we have to take a look at.
The county chooses to do it all in 1 day. It's the 3rd Friday of the month.
Right. So it's, I think we were optimistic this year, or last year when we set the budget. Unfortunately, it has not come to fruition. Hopefully some things, I mean, there's some glimmers of hopes out there that some things, some activities are gonna start happening potentially, that may help us, but it won't, they're not solutions yet. And it's, these are tough decisions.
I have one question. I know last year I sort of came in on the second half of the budgeting process. But I remember learning that Lonnie's predecessor, Ms. Blatnick, used to take a very conservative approach on budgeting severance taxes. And when I look back at prior budgets, it always seemed like as long as the severance taxes came in somewhat close to what they did the year before, we did reasonably well, and we caught up a lot of ground. I just want to know what kind of approach is being taken. I mean, the numbers that we're looking at now, the preliminary numbers, are they as conservative on severance taxes, or are they assuming that we get roughly what we get every year?
It's gonna be.
And she basically used to assume that they went away,
No,
or at
we're,
least 75% of them went away.
we assume that they're gonna be what we got this year. So
That's already cooked in.
it'll be similar to what we got this year.
Okay, so 2013 projected, okay, has a very realistic
Right,
view of what we're going to get in severance taxes, and the 2014 budget
right.
has a realistic view.
It's just our best guess estimate, and we're not gonna go and put it 100,000 less than we got this year. We put it pretty much the same what we got in 2013. We projected it for 2014.
And those are still, just like we're looking at expenses, we'll be taking a look at some of our projected revenues as well. Because we need to be, especially in some of our funds, and I've been talking to folks about, you know, is it realistic that we may see an increase in water sales if we're not seeing an increase in, let's say, population? Are people going to use more water next year than they did this year? So I agree with the philosophy that we need to be conservative, both on our expenses and on our revenues, but at the same time, be reasonable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was a little cushion in here, which we experienced in prior years.
Right. But if we take a look at sales and use tax, this year we're down 600, about $500,000 down, and compared to what we had budgeted. So I think we have to continue to be somewhat maybe overly conservative on that standpoint.
And that underscores another reason why our economic development really has to kick into high gear. As I had shared with you following a meeting we had at First National Bank with those folks, I think it would behoove us to look at a portfolio of buildings to see if we can't get a PR firm or somebody in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, to see if we can market some of these buildings to people who have sufficient capital that they can come in and make those investments and create construction jobs and create some retail.
I've already got staff working on that.
Very good. The other thing I'd recommend is take a look at the EB5 program, which is basically Trinidad's ideal for it.
Right.
We're under 20,000 population, high unemployment, and basically what it is an individual from foreign country invests a minimum of $500,000, and it creates jobs in the area. There has to be that linkage, and basically they get a temporary green card, and after 2 years there's a possibility they can get citizenship. And my research indicates that folks in the $500,000 range are very motivated, and they're not looking for an immediate return on the investment. They are looking for the green card so they can send their kids to college and schools here in the United States. They're seeing that $500,000 investment as preservation of assets as opposed to, it's a safe haven
Right.
for their money. There is one company in Denver that has statewide jurisdiction on the EB5s, and I can get you the name of that company, but basically if there's a developer in Trinidad or a venture in Trinidad, they would have to partner with that company in Denver, and they put the foreign investor together with the development. So I hope our economic development folks will start looking at that as well.
We've had that initial discussion, but I'll follow up. And then the folks that, at least earlier this year, were looking at Cougar Canyon, they were looking at the EB5 program.
Exactly.
I need to follow up
Yes.
to see where they're at, because I keep hearing glimmers that they're gonna do something, but, you know, they haven't pulled the trigger yet.
It's a matter of marketing. Just if you link up with the right group, and like I say, there's one in Denver that's statewide, they can help you find those investors. It'd be great if we could get Cougar Canyon back on the map. And my research indicates China, India, and Latin America are, I mean, they're ready to invest serious money in the United States. Is, again, just a way to preserve their capital.
And maybe one of them will have some investment, since China's looking for coal, maybe they'll be looking at coal.
The EB5 program has been looked at to a certain extent. I think it's a great thing to look at, but there aren't a lot of flow. The EB5 program is not bringing a lot of flow of capital into this country. And I mean, I think it's a tool that we can look at, but it's a very, very, very slow process. It's a lot of hoops that you have to run through.
I think they're simplifying it, and I think they're even trying to come up with an EB6 now in connection with,
Yes, I
with
have heard that, because
the
EB5 has
reform.
kind of fallen on fallow times.
Okay.
But yes, if there is an EB6 around the corner, I'd encourage you.
Yeah, it's, I think, part of the immigration reform. So, but they're worth looking into.
Right. Okay. Good, we can use all the tools in our toolbox that we can put in. So look, next week we will just give to council with no discussion, just give you a copy of the draft budget so that you can start taking a look at it. Again, we'll have staff come and do some highlight presentations, give you a chance to ask questions on the 8th. And then we're planning for some public input on the 15th. And then we still have through the rest of October and November, continue to look at how do we tweak the budget and get it adopted in December, if not earlier.
Any other comments or questions from council? So I think we're ready to move back to agenda item number 3, which is discussion regarding authorization to expend budgeted funds for vehicle purchases. And Mr. Aker, you will present this item,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
understand.
Pioneer, as I've come to council a couple of times, Pioneer Resources has been converting to compressed natural gas, their vehicle fleet. They contacted us and had a couple of more vehicles that they thought were available that we might want to take a look at. The Power and Light Fund had actually budgeted enough money to where the first vehicle we bought only took a little bit less than half of what they had budgeted. They do have a vehicle that's a diesel that has been kind of a headache that they would like to consider replacing. And what we would do with that vehicle is we've got some other ones we just put on the auction block to get some money back into our pocketbook. And then the gas department had a large compressor budgeted. They've got a vehicle that would be great to hand me down to the maintenance department, and we could get rid of another vehicle. I'm a firm believer in sometimes you have to spend a little money up front, make sure that you're gonna have money in the end. In this case, I'm seeking, I think, council's direction as well. As I look at the budget, and as we're going into leaner times, it's one of those balancing acts of do we spend the $25,000 that would be, well, actually it's $38,000 now in anticipation that no more vehicles for the next several years. That would be the only reason I would support this. But these are not have-to items either, because we can get by. Both vehicles that we would be replacing have got relatively low miles and can last, and haven't been too maintenance intensive in the past year or so. But we just wanted to bring this back for some discussion with council before bringing it forward for a full vote. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Are the vehicles that we were replacing them with better than the vehicles that we're doing? I mean, are they gonna last longer, be more efficient?
I think for, I would say, yes, for the Power and Light vehicle. I've heard nothing but complaints about the diesel that we bought. I think on the gas department, it's an opportunity to take a vehicle with some mileage. We used to have a routine of trying to get vehicles traded out between 50 and 65,000 miles and then pass them down. It gives us a chance to get rid of a two-wheel drive vehicle in the maintenance department and replace it with another four-wheel drive vehicle. So I mean, if we do the purchase, it's a good purchase. I think we're getting a good deal from Pioneer again. It's just with the fact that we're looking at tough budget times. It's a little bit of money to spend, I think we'll have to continue to watch and just say, you know, these are the vehicles, if we go forward with this vehicle purchase, these are our vehicles and we're gonna have to live with what we've got.
Refresh my recollection, they donated 2 vehicles
We
to the,
donated 3 vehicles to the city.
okay, and then we bought some?
We bought 4 about a month or so ago.
Okay.
Similar conditions, similar mileage, similar prices.
Were purchase of vehicles included in the budget for power and light and gas?
For power and light, yes. For gas, no.
What would you get back on the auction, roughly?
I asked our maintenance, fleet maintenance to kind of look into that. I can't give you a good answer to that.
From the 3 vehicles that we bought, I think that was back in August, August 2013. And I know at that time our packets had approximated the cost to be $75,000. And there was a reference in that packet to the same $40,000 that is referenced as having been budgeted by Power and Light. How much did we spend? I think it was like not to exceed $75,000?
We spent a total of $70,100 on the actual vehicle purchase. I understand we had to do a couple of vehicles we had to get some tires for. And I know for the water department, they had to get a toolbox for one of them, but some minimal cost. I said, what I said is no, even for power and light, if we get these vehicles, no utility boxes, things of that nature, can you take them as is? And they did say yes. So from power and light standpoint, we've got room in that existing budget. As far as we identified about $40,000, we would be hitting about that $40,000 mark if we did another vehicle purchase.
Personally, I think it's a no-brainer. We need to make this purchase.
Yes. It's one of those things where you don't get these opportunities often, but it is one of those balancing acts of tight budgets as well.
And we will save on future maintenance.
Yes.
And will they continue to let us know if other vehicles become available?
Yes, they have. In fact, they had made the commitment that they would offer us a total of 10 vehicles.
After sitting here for almost an hour and a half here and speaking about our budgets and stuff, we're looking at money here that, my dad always used to have the old saying, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. And that's what I'm saying here. I don't think we could afford it. I think we have to start tightening our belts. We're over here talking about maybe possible furlough days. I see one city employee out there in the audience today. I think that's the last thing on this whole council's mind about furlough days or any type of layoffs. I don't think none of us want to see that. Because without our city employees, we don't have a city. And now we're sitting here talking about looking at 2 trucks at this amount, which I just heard we have to tighten up. We're all in the hole. Every department we have, we're in the hole. And I don't see, even if it's $37,000, $37,000 is a lot of money to me. Let's put that away, let's save that, and let's look forward. If we have to nickel and dime with these trucks, we're gonna have to do it. We have to learn a lesson, this council and I have to learn a lesson. When there's no money, we can't spend it. If we can't give our city employees a damn 5-10 cent raise because our budget won't allow us, then how can we turn around and spend this type of money on any kind of vehicles? Even if it is allocated, even if the money's there. Let's leave that money there and hope maybe we can get by. And when times do happen, maybe they are gonna get better, maybe they're gonna get tougher. But at least we have this money saved where we could get some other trucks or whatever. But let's just think of our city employees first. You know, and if I'm out of order,
No,
Madam
no,
Mayor,
no.
you stop me or gavel me or whatever. But I'm sick and tired of this, going down, walking on town, hearing that city employees are saying that it was my fault and the mayor's fault for taking away home vehicles, for taking their vehicles to take it home. Now, I want you guys to know, I didn't have no conversations and I didn't have no idea what this was going on. But I just wanted to make that straight. Because even if the city employees or anybody wants to ask me questions, please come to me. I don't like to hear rumors about the mayor. I don't like to hear rumors about myself, Ms. Velasquez, that it was all this kind of combination that we thought about taking vehicles home. So that's all I have to say, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments? We just had discussions about dinging our budget for possibly $500,000, $500,000. And I think it's symbolic. You know, you're talking about maybe $37,000, $38,000, but it is symbolic. $500,000 that we'll have to incur in expenses for health insurance, and we haven't even entered into the discussion about what portion of that our employees might have to pick up, and it just sticks in my craw to think that we're going to buy more vehicles, irrespective if they're 38,000. I think we need to clamp down as hard as we can to minimize the additional burden that we're going to end up placing on all of our employees, because we're looking at some pretty bleak numbers. Now, if Pioneer has represented that they're going to give us an opportunity maybe in the future, maybe after we get some sales figures for September, August, September, and I'm praying that we've had an uptick with, you know, the activity, arcade and things like that. Maybe at that point we could take a look at purchasing additional vehicles, but that's kind of my sense right now. Anybody else want to weigh in?
When do we need to make a decision on these vehicles?
I told her I'd be taking it to council today to get a sense of it. If you want to wait and do anything formally next week, I can talk with her about that as well, because I think that's when we have to do it anyway, so. What they're doing is they get vehicles in, they offer them to employees, they offer them to us. I don't know, they may be offering to the county, and then they try to get them to auction as soon as they can.
Well, I can see both points of view. I'll give you my sense. You've asked for it. I think that symbolic statements are really important, except when we're giving up a lot in fair market value. I mean, if we're gonna have to replace those trucks anyway, and we're getting them for 2/3 of what they would go for on the open market, so what was suggested in here, 17 or 18 instead of 25. You also don't cut your nose to spite your face.
Right.
So I can see both points of view. I think I'd want to think on it a little bit more. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Without these two vehicles, what is the overall condition of our fleet of vehicles? I know for a while, my memory serves me, for a while there, they were pretty dilapidated, but then I thought we went through a phase where we were catching up and upgrading, et cetera. Are those still in pretty fair shape, or are we?
I think without these two vehicles, we've got a pretty decent fleet. I know there's, what we were able to do with the last set, one of the vehicles that we haven't been able to replace that we'd like to replace at some point in time is in parts. I call it a baby dump. It's basically a one-ton truck with a dump on it. But it still works, and it's great for what it needs to be done, so he's usually another vehicle unless he needs that dump. So I think we're, as I said last time, we're looking pretty good. I mean, I think we were able to get rid of we're able to, when we gather them all up and get them set for auction or bids, we're gonna be looking pretty good with vehicles, even without these two. This just makes kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak.
And it's probably a good thing, a couple of thoughts I have. I think that, well, nobody likes to buy a new car more than I do. But at the same time, I hate car payments as much as anybody else does too. My personal vehicle, for example, just turned over 100,000. I intend on keeping driving it. I think that there is a difference between a personal budget and a business budget, if you will. And there are certain things that are essential to a business that may not be quite as important in a personal arrangement. If we have the time to table this for just a bit, that may not be a bad idea. I know it speaks volumes in the streets, as has been pointed out, what we are doing here, but at the same time, employees have to have the proper tools to do their job as we expect them to. And if we don't have an alternative, it makes sense to take advantage of the 2/3 purchase price as compared to not, but I'm done.
You know, Mr. McKay's question, how is our bucket trucks at the Power and Light Department? Have they been inspected lately?
Yes,
They
yes.
have, and they passed, and they're all
Yes.
safe regards as far as our employees are
Yes,
concerned? Okay.
yes. In fact, we've got one bucket truck, that was being used or could be used by Parks and Rec. It's been sitting. We're actually thinking it's not the right size for Parks and Rec, or for Parks and Boulevard, sorry. And we've had some people express interest in that truck. It might be time to say, let's just don't park it, because really, the trees at Parks and Boulevard trims they use are help from Power and Light as well. So we're looking at things like that to, reduce I'm looking at how to reduce our fleet as well at the same time.
I drove patrol cars for a long time, and for me, it was more than just a car, it was a tool necessary to my work. And if we're asking employees to use equipment that is not safe, we put ourselves at risk for more workman's comp claims.
Right.
And we really have to have a broader view of things than perhaps just the bottom line.
Right. No, believe me, we're not, to my knowledge, operating any unsafe vehicles.
No,
But that's one thing, that's our goal, is to make sure.
But that's a consideration that we
Yes.
have a responsibility to entertain as compared to, if I'm driving a puddle jumper to and from work, that's different than trying to drive cross country.
Right. I will communicate with my contact at Pioneer and let them know that we want to make this decision. We want to bring it back next week as part of a regular agenda item, and is there any other additional information that would help you in making what I consider a difficult decision at this time?
Is there a possibility we could have an inventory of city vehicles, age, mileage, so
Yes.
that we have a sense of what the dimensions of our fleet
Yes.
includes, whether there's, I think that would kind of help us make that evaluation about the tools that are available to employees. I think this is also another reason why all of us need to get busy promoting that adoption of the home rule charter change, because we blew about, I'd say, $700,000 out of fund balance with North Lake because we couldn't get a low interest loan. I mean, that'll kill us. That's $700,000 that can be used to offset this $500,000. We got to get that home rule charter amended so that if our ox is in the ditch, we can get a low interest loan.
Yes. Okay.
And even lease purchase agreements on police cars or a fire truck or something that we might need.
Okay. Okay, thank you all.
I agree that inventory would be very nice to have, because in looking at the information we have provided to us today, it gives us E7 with approximately 95,000 years, but doesn't tell us what make, model,
Right.
year
Okay.
we're talking about replacing, so that would be helpful.
Okay.
Any other comments? And I think we're ready for the oh, wait a minute, agenda item 5. Now we need to talk about nonprofit funding. And Mr. Aker, you get to present this item also.
You guys are gonna be tired of listening to me today. This is a long overdue to bring back to city council. A discussion of what city council's desires are for the second half of funding for nonprofits within the community. If you'll recall, and you probably all do, is we allocated a full set of funding as shown in the accompanying table, and then in the budget for this year. But yet we only gave out a portion of that funding and wanted to take a look at the budget for where we sat with the budget. The only exception would be is with Crossroads Turning Point. I brought that back in May. We're contractually obligated to fund them, and from a budgetary standpoint, at that time my thought, it still is, it's a good investment for the funds. Otherwise, I think we would be spending over almost 3 times that amount, taking care of those issues in an alternative manner. I don't have any true recommendations because it's really, again, it's a small dollar amount as you take a look at it. As far as some of the remaining nonprofit funding that we might want to take a look at. I do have recommendations as far as on how we proceed for the 2014 budget. There are things like Crossroads Turning Point, Noah's Ark, which I believe we also got a contract with, the Economic Development Corporation, the Arts and Cultural Advisory Commission, and the Senior Center, all activities directly impacted by the city if we were not to provide some funding for those nonprofits and allow them to leverage the funds that we provide them. So my proposal is to add these as line items in our city's budget. As we take a look at our budget as a whole, consider those as things that we need to provide. And then with the other items, instead of going through the exercise at budget time, is my thought for other nonprofits, and the list may be different than this list when we look at 2014, is to consider setting a budget amount in the budget for nonprofits. And then once the budget's adopted, go out and seek requests, and kind of like a grant process for nonprofits. Council or a committee of council could take a look at what they, at each one of the grant requests. Or I threw out as another option, potentially, since we do have the Trinity Community Foundation, maybe earmark some funding to the Community Foundation and have them do a grant process. Just some different ideas of ways to handle that would hopefully streamline it and still accomplish some of our goals. With that, I'll open it up for city council discussion.
Isn't there also a contract with the senior center?
I think so.
Yes, it's we provide maintenance on the building. I think this is above and beyond the maintenance. It's actually some additional funding. And I believe previously I know the contracts for Noah's Ark and
there is a contract with Senior Citizen Center regarding
Isn't that
rent or utilities or something like that.
I think it covers several different things, but we're contracted with them as well.
Yes.
Any comments?
Yeah, I just have one comment, and I think your comments actually address, I just want to make sure. For instance, we've taken the path that we're certainly fund the people that we're actually obligated to fund, or people that are providing services that otherwise would require the city to expend funds.
Yes.
We also have this whole arts category here, where it seems like we're walking down a path where we're funding the same thing every time. And like, for instance, why can't the E.R.A Mitchell be eligible? We didn't consider them in the first half. Why can't a CRT become eligible? We didn't consider them in the first half. Yet we have, I love the Trinidad Area Arts Council, but why should they be the only arts that we fund? So I guess your comment was that we have a more general category rather than line items for continuing each of the prior recipients.
Well, I guess going forward, my recommendation would be have a line item that is, for lack of better words, nonprofit grant allocation. And it's a set amount, and then we would solicit interest, kind of like Bar-In does and Trinidad Community Foundation does, for people that might want to submit for a grant application. For a discussion about the second half allocation, council did budget as shown in the table for certain entities to potentially receive funding. So I think either, if I'm understanding your question, council member, is should we just approve the second half allocation of some amount or the amount that we had budgeted, or should we take a look at some of the ones that did not?
I think we should give them, they applied and we never said no. All we said was, we're going to keep the people that have become dependent upon us funded for the first half of the year. And I think we're all hoping that we might see an increase in sales taxes, and that would
Right.
allow us to maybe bring more people on into the tent, increase sort of the allocations to people who've gotten them before. We've never really acted on that. I mean, I know the answer is that sales taxes are down, but I don't think that necessarily means that we still just follow the same horses and just support the same horses.
And I'm at a little bit of disadvantage because I wasn't here for all the discussions for the 2013 budget, but by looking at the table, it looks like things such as the theater and Southern Colorado Youth Academy and the Golf Association, they had requested monies from council, but council did not allocate in the budget any funding for those groups.
Well, my memory is a little bit different. I said, my memory was that at mid-year, we were going to reconsider what we were going to do. That didn't mean a set no. What it meant as far as writing checks, we're not going to write any new checks. But what we are going to do is write checks for the people that we've supported in the past. And then at mid-year, we were going to reevaluate based upon the financial health of the city, how much those people that gotten checks would receive for the second half, and then we would also be looking at
Okay.
new applicants.
And my recollection was that we decided that the people who had not applied in previous years, that we would not be providing funding for them.
As far as writing checks.
That's what I hate about not having work sessions recorded, because it goes from a work session into the budget and we don't have anything to fall back on. And that we would allow 50% of what was the 2012 award to be paid in the first half of the year, and then we would revisit it in June. But my recollection is that those that had not applied previously wouldn't be considered in June.
See, my memory was that they wouldn't get that first check, but they would be, I specifically remember re-inviting them to see us.
To reapply.
To reapply, yeah, but not to give, I mean, they have to.
No, we didn't budget anything. for
And it was,
but-
and with the, depending on the house, what we had left in the budget and what we had, that was a big objective. And I might like to add to your deal there on the Trinidad Arts Council, you know, they have no way of getting any funding unless we give it to them. SCRT and the other arts councils have ways of raising money. So that's a real big issue there, that if, I mean, it's fair to be to everybody else, but the Arts Council, that's run by our city, has no way of getting any money except for us.
Well, now there are two, there's four different art-related entities that
Right.
appear here. One is the Youth Advisory Council, which I think is the one you're talking about, that the police department,
Yeah.
that the chief
Take-
takes care of. And then there's also the Trinidad Area Arts
Right,
Council.
and then there's also SCRT.
And then there's SCRT, there's the Southern Colorado Youth Academy, which is new, and then of course we have our Arts and Cultural Commission, which is a
That's the
city
one that
commission.
owns
Yeah,
the
that's the
city.
one.
But
Yeah.
the Area Arts Council has as much access to funding, outside funding, I think, as CRT.
They are dependent on grants, and typically in the past, to my knowledge, both the Mitchell Museum and the SCRT typically go to the tourism board for funding from the city, rather than this route. And some of them also come to the Arts and Cultural Commission for small grants for special projects as well.
All right, I don't believe there
It
were
is
tourism dollars.
confusing.
I think we should invite them back to answer these
Well, I think
questions.
last year SCRT had come in a little late. You know, when we had already said it, then they sent Paulette.
No, I think they came in,
They were a little late coming in because they were talking about purchasing the building.
I don't remember them being late, but
How much money do we have available to distribute in this next half of the budget year?
We've got, as far as budgeted,
Yes, budgeted.
if we allocate, we had a total allocation in the budget of $114,570. We allocated for the first half $73,035, so we've got about that $73,000 remaining in the budget, as budgeted. As in the other previous discussion, it's a matter
The
of.
extra trucks.
Yeah. It's, it's just a matter of, how we want to take a look at it.
I think-
And I took a look, just to kind of give you some work I did, because I was really close to adding a recommendation and I did not, is if you take a look at the things that I've listed are the things that I think we need to provide funding for, because they're providing a function that the city would otherwise have to either make a choice to provide or not provide. And my rough numbers, and I wish I would have kept my scribbles, by the time we get to that point, it's like tens of thousands, it's less than $10,000 that we would be looking at allocating to some of these other organizations. So it becomes a matter of making the decision, do we allocate, what we need to provide, because they're providing a service, like Noah's Ark is our animal control center. Because most of the other ones, like the Youth Advisory Council, that's $2,200. The Trinidad Area Arts Council, that's another $2,200, so about $5,000. The Southern Colorado Development Disabilities, that's $600. The Arts and Cultural is part of the city. Everything else is a part of the city. The only other one would be the Advocates Against Domestic Violence, and that's another $3,000. So, if you look at it, and that's in that realm, it's not $73,000. It's more like $10,000 to those entities that don't provide a direct service that the city would otherwise have to take a look at.
so where does that leave us?
I think you've got a couple of options. You could say, let's go ahead and allocate the remaining, 6 months to these ones that we've identified in the spreadsheet as what we budgeted. If you wanted to leave the money the same and invite folks to make another round of requests, we could certainly do that. Because that would open it up to some of the, like the Mitchell Museum and SCRT to come and ask for some additional funding. But it's really, there's a couple of options. From a budgetary standpoint, the first option seems to make the most sense, and then take a look at how do we process things for 2014.
Tom, I was surprised that you included economic development, but didn't include the chamber. Do we have any contract with economic development?
No.
Do we
And
have
that
any
is-
contract with the chamber?
No, we don't. My thought is that typically if you don't have an economic development corporation, you typically have a staff member dedicated to economic development. So that was my thinking of a difference between economic development and the chamber. There's no intent of, no, the chamber's not worthy compared to economic development. I was just looking at it from more of a city function standpoint.
I think that the chamber is equally as important as economic development.
Well, and I'd like to make a comment in that regard as well, which is, the county hasn't given any money to ED this year, as far as I know. Is that right?
That's correct.
And there's no prospect at this point of them giving money.
I don't know.
I mean, I know we've revitalized the board, and they've cleaned things up with audits and strategic plans and so forth, but without a funded economic development board, all of that work is going to be for naught. And I happen to think that this is a case, you made the point before, sometimes you pay up a little bit up front and you reap the benefits down the road. I think we need serious, professional, experienced head for the, we need an experienced head for the economic development. We need to pay more than we have in the past if we want to actually have something done, like somebody be on top of the EB5, as the mayor mentioned. Somebody who's going to go out and market all these buildings. Right now, we're looking at a navel, or we're about to be. So when we talk about funding going forward, I'd like to not talk about pittance amounts here, okay? I'd like to talk about, we're either going to do it or we're not. And I think the county needs to step up. We need to have that conversation about where we can find the funds to seriously fund an economic development, Trinidad Los Angeles County Economic Development Board, or don't do it at all. Because the board cannot do all the things. I mean, we're talking about volunteer board there. And so, anyway.
And the board can't do consistent marketing that's necessary.
That's right.
I,
A lot of work to be done with Urban Renewal
Yes.
Authority.
Yes? And down the road, there could be, there could be a whole new organization formed comprised of Creative District, Economic Development, Main Street, Chamber, Urban Renewal.
No question. I mean, all of these pieces are coming together, and we've sort of got these stragglers out there that are underfunded. So I'd like to take them out of the area agency and do some serious work and put them as a budget item. And if we want to do that, we'll all decide, but I think it's a serious enough item that we need cooperation with the county, and we need serious commitments with if we're going to do it.
And some of them are questionable. I've questioned why did they end up in this category? Particularly the Arts and Cultural Commission. At one point in time, and Otter, correct me if I misspeak, there was an ordinance when the Arts and Cultural Commission was formed that the city funded them to the tune of $20,000 a year. Now they're down to maybe getting $4,500 as in the same area as a nonprofit.
I agree, either, go for it or don't go for it at all.
Right. Not the last ED meeting, but the previous ED meeting to that. Leanne and I started a discussion when we were having those meetings with the county commissioners and city council together, is we were trying to get in place, and Leanne wasn't at the last meeting, but trying to get another one of those meetings to talk just about economic development. That's our next step as far
Right,
as
we talked about it a
having
couple
that
of meetings.
discussion. And I agree. That's why I made the recommendation I made about making economic development a line item with the thought of we need to consider funding it to a greater level. The last I had talked to the county administrator, Leanne had mentioned that it still was not off the table for funding from the county. Because I think they share, or at least she and I share the same philosophy, is we need to get the right funding in economic development. But that'll be a discussion as we move forward with the budget.
So when do you think we can have that discussion?
I hope we can have it in October. I've not been able to loop back with Ms. Bevick about that, as far as her end on when that might work for the county commissioners.
Has consideration also been paid to perhaps paid seats on the Economic Development Board? Because I see a perfect fit, if you have some president of a bank who would serve on it, or other individuals.
We talked about that, and they come on the board.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've brought that up a couple of times, and I think it's an intriguing idea. I haven't ever heard anyone say no, it's just a level of detail of paying. And then I also brought up is membership. You know, become a membership organization, just not the board. And they did a fundraising drive at Arcade and raised $700.
Other comments?
When will we revisit again?
If you're ready to take action, we can put it on the agenda for next week. If you would like to have those who have not had funding come back in and make a pitch, we can get that scheduled for an upcoming work session. It's kind of, I guess, the desire of council. Do you want to fund the rest of the 6 months as was budgeted, or do you want to open it up for some of those that did not receive some funding allocated to potentially receive some allocation?
I don't think we have any choice. We have to fund what we have, and we're not, we say we're gonna have less than $10,000.
Right, it's not, if you take into account funding the ones that are kind of suggested line items, by the time you get down to there, it's not a.
My suggestion would be take that 10,000 and divide it up the ones that are there and give them any, I mean, if it takes $1,000 to each one, at least they got more than what.
Tell you what, I will put a couple of different options for allocating what's in the budget forward for council to consider potentially action on at next week's meeting, if that's would be beneficial.
And if you would include the actual amounts that we are contracted to pay to
Yes.
these certain organizations, that would be very helpful in allowing us to realize what's left.
Okay.
I think that, well, the arguments about funding other people, the discussion has been had, makes certain sense to me. I agree that, I think it's probably better that for the completion of this cycle, we fund those to whom we have current obligations before we start changing a horse in midstream and start including new things. And then once we're done with those committed obligations, then we can entertain new ideas and new ways to do business in the future.
And maybe I'm being redundant, but I want to make sure that I understand. Crossroads Turning Point, Noah's Ark, and the Senior Center, they're contracted, they're going to be taken care of.
We've got some sort of contract with them. The senior center, I need to revisit that contract. It's been many months since I visited that one, because I think what their request was in addition to what we already provide in the contract, but I'll get that information to City Council.
Well, I personally would be of the opinion that the Senior Citizen Center has to be one that we absolutely fund. Those individuals have to have a place where they can go. The meals are served there. It provides them social functions. I'm just dismayed that that facility isn't funded to the level that it can be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That would provide respite care for some of our families who have seniors who, you know, and it's great that they're open from 10 to 2, but I mean, that's a critical facility for our citizens.
Senior centers are always a challenge. You know, some folks have them in relation to a recreation center, to where they are open longer hours. Some folks have them separated. I've heard arguments for both ways. But it is one of those services that is traditionally provided for by a community.
Any other comments?
Will you also bring to us next week the various options you've set out as far as whether we will have line items for the budget next year, whether we'll just have one pool for remaining parties, whether or not we distribute or whether we provide that funding to the TCF so we can address all of
Yes, I
it
can.
in
Yes,
one ball of wax?
that makes a lot of sense.
One last comment on the budget. Is it appropriate to ask us all?
Because we're going to be talking about agenda items.
Okay, do we have in the budget a power and light superintendent in public works?
What I've got.
Department head?
I've got in the budget, a public works / utilities director, which covers power and light.
Right, that's what I
all
meant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, Mr. Fernandez is taking a look at the application so that we can, wanted another set of eyes so we can set up some interviews.
Where do you stand on that?
I had 15 applicants, 7 which are very strong, and actually got a call the other day from another gentleman that was gonna send in an application.
Okay, good.
I think we're at the point where we're ready to discuss any other agenda items, which is our agenda item 6. Does anyone have anything additional they care to share with Mr. Aker, or Mr. Aker, you and your staff care to share with us?
I've got one item.
Okay.
Mr. Matei and I went to the CML meeting in La Vida, and CML is getting ready. They've got a policy committee, and I wanted to see what council's interest were on if one of you might want to serve on that committee. Each entity of our size has got 1 seat. It's kind of difficult because most of the meetings are in Denver. But they have a couple of meetings a year. In their first 2, one is Friday, October 18th. The second one is Friday, December 6th. They're at CML. And what the CML Policy Committee is, they follow all the legislative actions and make recommendations for CML for lobbying our state legislator during the coming year. The list of folks you've got anywhere from having council members to city managers to other staff that sit in on it. We don't currently have a member. I didn't know what council's thought was of how active you would like to be in that. I'm going to monitor it. I would plan on monitoring all the legislative bills this year and providing periodic updates through. CML's got a great update that they kind of track and work with them to try to track it. It's definitely not one that we have to be on. There's the Economic Development Council of Colorado has a fall conference in Denver that same week, and I was planning on attending that and was going to go ahead and just sit in on the meeting on the 18th. But I wanted to just see if there's anyone on city council that might have an interest sitting on that committee.
Could you send us some additional information on this?
Yes, I can. I hope you guys have all gotten this, but I will scan it and send it to you as well.
I don't recall, what was the deadline or the time?
There was actually no deadline on.
That might be something that would be worthy of waiting until post-election, because there will be changes.
Right.
Yes.
Somebody.
So I'll send it out. There's no, because you could join that committee. They anticipate changes in leadership as well, so.
Any other agenda items?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask Mr. Akers, did you ever get those figures on what you're saving on overtime and the vehicles parking?
We're still gathering that
Okay.
information. It's just been a short time frame, so we're trying to give it some more time.
Okay.
And I'll just ask further update on North Lake.
They did some, I actually went up to the site on Saturday. They drilled some additional dewatering wells. The pipeline was moving forward. In fact, they made some pretty significant progress over the last time I had seen it. They had some issues getting some of the pumps on site because of pump shortages because of all the floods up north is what I was told. We do have another project team meeting tomorrow morning, and I plan on calling into that and listening in. Mr. Downs has made a call to the bonding company to kind of figure out what, if we were to take action, kind of what the next steps would be. My understanding, looking at the bond documents, is that we'd have to provide something in writing, but it's like, what's the time frame after that before something could happen? So he is making progress. What's called the berm fill, which is the additional part of the dam, should be complete by, well, Linda's gone, complete by today as far as the main portion of it, and then they've got some area against one of the embankments to finish up. He has assured us he's gonna make get it all done, but we're putting adequate pressure on him.
Are you more or less confident from our last discussion that will be done this year?
I am confident, we'll have the bulk of the work done as far as anything that would cause restrictions. I think if the weather is kind to us, as far as freezing temperatures and when they call, what is this called, a full ground thaw, we can get the reseeding done as well by the end of this term.
So you're saying as a worst case, there wouldn't be any further cost overruns by extending into next year?
No, my preference is to get it done this year because I don't want to incur any more costs on for us or anyone doing oversight.
No, I understand, that's what we all want, but you said you were confident that we could get everything
Yeah,
done except for.
Like reseeding and stuff like that, which wouldn't require engineering oversight, but we'd have to have a follow-up inspection.
And if I may, please, Councilman Miles and Madam Mayor, the individual that I've been calling is a guy by the name of Stephen Blake. We've been playing telephone tag. He's at Granite E.R.A. Inc. That is the surety on the bond. And I will let you know, either by way of a confidential memo, even though my comments right now obviously are not very confidential, but I will let you know as soon as I hear or know anything. I will let you know.
Anything else?
I have a couple of things.
Yes, ma'am.
We have on the calendar an informal CDOT presentation for Thursday. Do we know what issues will be up for discussion, and will the city have representation?
I don't know what the issues are, but the city will. I did get an agenda today for that COG meeting. I've not had a chance to take a look at it. I will forward it to council.
Okay, and my second question was, it seems like the last 3 meetings, we've started the meeting at 7. We do a couple of things, we go into executive session, and all of the public has to just sit out here and wait. Is it possible that in the future, when we know that we are going to have an executive session that needs to be conducted at the early part of the meeting, any chance that we could routinely schedule those as a special meeting at 6 o'clock and have the regular meeting at 7? It would also allow us to conclude our meeting at an earlier time.
Sounds good.
I don't see why we couldn't do
It
that.
could be
That's a good
6:30,
suggestion.
depending upon what
Yeah.
we needed to have. done by.
Because basically, we were endeavoring to do that to reduce attorney
Attorney costs.
fees
Yes.
for.
And so it wouldn't be necessary if we were going to leave the executive session at the very end of the meeting, but I think
Yeah,
it's
people
getting
have 7
older.
o'clock and
Yeah,
in their head and
that's a
like
good
that.
suggestion.
And then they
If
just come and
it's
sit and-
doable, if it's doable, I
We
think.
can, from a procedure standpoint, it's very doable. Good suggestion, thank you.
Yeah, because it is kind of disruptive to come, say, go in there and then sit here milling, bless their hearts. So that's a good idea. Anything else?
I have one comment.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone who knows me knows about my competitive spirit. And for 29 years, I made traffic stops, and it was essential to my survival and my safety that I assume control of situations. And that's not always appropriate, and it certainly wasn't appropriate at last week's meeting for me to do so here. That having been said, I am embarrassed to see my behavior at the end of the last meeting on TV, and I feel obligated, and it's necessary for me to apologize to my council, and you, Mr. Bernardo in particular. My comments were out of hand, and it won't happen again. I'm sorry.
How nice.
Really? Classy. I apologize.
And I promise I will hit you with my gun.
I was usually close, I know.
All righty, anything else, folks? If not, I think we've completed all public posted business for the work session on September 24th. And, oh, I don't need a motion to adjourn, so I will just note that it is 3:29 p.m. and we have concluded our meeting. Thank you all for being
Thank
here
you.
and participating.